People don't see when you make a shh thing on the camera. This is an audio podcast, JM. You can't do this.
Oh, well, now we need a video podcast so people can see our faces and how silly we look pointing at each other and pointing at ourselves.
Red faces all over the time.
Welcome to the What's Your Baseline podcast. In this show, we talk about our experiences and lessons learned in enterprise architecture and business process management. What's Your Baseline is designed to be for everyone. Newbies who are just getting started with these topics, organizations who want to improve their EA and BPM groups and the value they get from it, as well as practitioners who want to get a different perspective and care about the discipline.
Each episode will tackle different key topics, providing context, background, best practices, and stories from the road, inviting you to learn from our challenges and successes, and demonstrating key tools to help you set up your practice and get the most out of it.
I'm your host, Roland Wolt, and I'm joined today by my co-host, JM Erlinson.
Hey, JM, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Roland. We are recording this podcast. I think this is our last of season 4. My goodness. I can't believe we've gotten this far, my friend, but it's been quite the ride so far. And I'm really excited for our next season. I've been looking at the previews in our little tracking tool Notion, and it looks like a fantastic season 5 to come. What do you think, my friend?
That is one thing, but I have to admit, I'm even more excited about the fact that tomorrow one of my favorite TV shows starts its season 2. Strange New Worlds. So now there's two things. There's two things now. One is people will think about, when did we record this episode? When Strange New Worlds starts tomorrow, but it has started when they listen to it. But more importantly, you're going on a journey, to strange new places. And I think that's about the topic that we want to discuss today in our show, don't we, JM?
Oh, that's the one. I see what you did there, Roland, because today's show is all about customer experience management, which many of you might know more practically as customer journey mapping. So today we're going to go all through that. Now, we did have a previous short, a little bit more about empathetic process, the idea of incorporating a customer perspective into your process. Today, we're going to go further. We're going to go all the way down into this discipline. And I would love to say it's an emerging discipline. I would love to say that, but it isn't. Roland, when I was looking up some of the reference material for how things are done, what people are thinking about it, I found an article in 2010 by the Harvard Business Review, which said a long-standing practice is customer journey mapping. So this has been around for a long time. If you haven't embraced customer journey mapping, customer experience management yet, we're already 13 years behind the Harvard Business Review. I think there's a lot to catch up on. So today we're going to walk you through it. And
I'm pretty sure they are another 13 or 20 years behind what people did in the field on that topic. But either way, JM, let's start, as we always start, with some definitions, because you threw two terms into it, customer experience management and customer journey management. Can you elaborate a little bit on what those terms mean for all those guys who want to drop out of the podcast after minute 1 and want to know, that's not worth listening to us? So what are experience management and journey management?
That's a great question. So customer experience management is the larger practice, and customer journey mapping is the individual task that is done, or the part of the practice that is reflected in modeling in communication platforms. But customer experience management is the larger piece of the puzzle. So what is customer experience management? What we're trying to do is we're trying to unite the story between what a customer does and what we do. And to do that, and in doing that, we're looking to improve how our customers interact with us as a company. Now, as a note, I won't be, and I think in this episode, we won't be as much covering internal customer journey mapping, although I've seen a couple of organizations who've done a very good job with that. And in particular, when we take a look at companies looking to improve their employee experience, that's certainly a part of how customer journey mapping has been used, or customer experience management has been used. But let's talk about customer experience management at a high level. I've got a couple of references. I'd encourage you to look at the show notes to see some of the other thought leadership that I thought was interesting up until this episode. And from what I've seen from customer experience management, it's about facilitating the creation of better experiences by first understanding your customer, right? So you need to understand what is your customer, or who are your customers. What are they looking to do? So what is their purpose in interacting with your organization? So what do they want from you? And where are they struggling to achieve that? So where are their pain points? What would cause them to leave? And there's a really good piece of information we'll talk about a little bit in the risks section about how that's a specific direct value to the organization who's undergoing this exercise, that they can improve their customer retention. It also helps you, you do customer experience management, not just for keeping customers you have, but also identifying your customer segments. It does tie into marketing, which is great. So you can understand why a customer might make a decision, what you can do to influence that decision, how you can lead your customer to better engage with your services so they get more out of them and tell their friends and bring more people and grow the top line. It's about getting into your customer's head. That's customer experience management.
Yeah, I would even cast the net even wider. And we heard that with Mark in the last episode. You know, when you think about when organizations use customer journey mapping or any of those techniques that we're going to talk about in this episode, they start with their product, right? And the example that he gave was like, oh, if you're a rental car company, guess what? You're going to start with, oh, customer rents a car. And you might miss that the solution for the problem that the customer had to go from whatever location A to B, the solution might be a scooter or might be a ticket for public transportation. So I think if you understand and cast that net a little bit wider, if you understand truly your customer, you find new business opportunities. So it gives you the input on your strategy to say, are we actually offering the right products and services to our customers?
Absolutely. And this is expensive. It's expensive to become a telepath and be able to read the minds of your customers to know exactly what they actually want. So customer experience management at least gives you a framework that lets you do very human discovery and problem solving to better address those needs, so you can target them with the right products and services at the right time. They keep saying that in marketing, that's important.
I agree. And I think the big challenge, no matter how far you cast your net, is in organizations, typically people have an inside-out perspective. Oh, this is my job. This is what we're doing. We're producing widgets and do this and that and that. And to produce that widget, we need to do step A, B, and C. They don't look from the outside in. And that is something that customer experience management aims for, right? To say, hey, flip the perspective and say, okay, what the customer actually needs? Not what you can do, right? But what do they actually need? And then you can go into the rabbit hole. And I'm thinking about personalization, get your sneakers printed the way you want it, up to maybe the model that we've seen 40, 50 years ago, when we had 3 TV stations and people got ads and said, oh, buy this new thing, this new TV, it's in color now, hooray, So simpler times, right? And I think every organization will have to make a decision to which degree of detail they go. But the underlying problem is the same. Change your perspective. Change it from inside out to outside in.
Absolutely. And the whole discipline of customer experience management extends much beyond just the analysis, right? You're trying to put this into practice. And so that could involve a combination of strategy. It could involve marketing. It can involve the people who are building your systems and implementing new ways for your customers to interact with you. It could involve working with partners, working with your extended community. In fact, for people who are making stuff, it'll help you determine what content is going to best hit, the best way to approach that. For people who are designing systems, either designing the whole automation or the user experience, it can help identify where your customers are struggling to interact with your systems and give you stress points, give you points of analysis where you can eliminate frustration. You can make it easier to use. And lastly, for process engineers in particular, of course, Roland and I come from that perspective. It gives you an understanding of what it would take to streamline your customer's flow by streamlining your flow. And those are very important things.
Yeah. And to be very, very clear, all those examples that you just gave, they could be packed into, oh yeah, this is what IT does. Customer experience management is not only for digital products. Customer experience management is a way of thinking that you should apply to everything. If you have a lemonade stand, or if you offer a pulled pork chicken sandwich. No, that's not a thing, is it? Anyways,
it is.
So you offer this
together.
Yeah, you offer that stuff. You should think about, how do you deliver your goods to your customer? What makes them happy?
Exactly. And that leads to some benefits and risks, right? Because we talked about at the very beginning this idea of customer acquisition versus customer retention. We say it's about 7 times more expensive, I think it is, to acquire a new customer than it is to retain a customer. And I got from one of our references, we got an interesting statistic. They say that increasing your customer retention rate by just 5% can increase your profits by somewhere between 25 and 95%, depending on the cost of customer acquisition. That's a huge potential benefit for just making your customers want to use your services, your existing customers. So doing customer journey mapping, doing customer experience management is really important. In terms of benefits, besides retention, and another risk is your competitors are doing this already. I want to talk about being competitive in the marketplace. You're being beaten by people who are focused on customer experience. There's a saying that I say for a lot of the people that I talk to about product differentiation, and particularly in a crowded space where you have products that are very similar to each other. I mean, Roland and I work at competitors that there's a lot of similarities between what we do, but we can take a look at the marketplace of process and architecture, and I would say that there's a pretty big overlap in capabilities. So how do companies choose to differentiate themselves? You can differentiate yourself based on technical excellence, which is an expensive process that you have to be guessing at thought leadership and market direction. But I've also seen companies really win the market based off of their customer experience. I know in voice acting, there's a phrase, excellence is expected. That people are all at the very highest level of voice talent. People choose to work with people that are easy to work with. And it's the same thing in business. Customers choose to work with businesses and choose to engage with businesses that are easy to work with, that make their journey as seamless as possible.
That is true, but we still win because we have the nicer candy colors in our corporate identity. You can't mess with that. But either way, I think you're absolutely right. And I think this is new to a lot of our audience. New in the sense of, I have never done this, or I've touched this, and this is what the designers do. And when I worked at that little audit company, we had a team that literally wanted to be different. And when they came on a large project, they occupied a big room, redecorated it, changed the tables, put table lamps, fancy table lamps on it. They called it the design studio, and they all wore turtlenecks. Yeah, it was fancy, but they wanted to be different. It didn't resonate well with all of the project members, to say at least. But I think the benefits of having people focusing on this is very big, because what does it do? It's twofold. One is it makes you think, which is always a good thing. But the other thing is you also get some artifacts that we'll talk about in the second part of this show, some artifacts that help bringing people on the same page. And that is quite the same as if you would look at an application landscape or a process map or an org chart or whatever people in architecture and process management groups do. So I think those shared artifacts have a benefit. It just extends what our practitioners currently do.
I agree. We always talk about this visibility, this transparency is really important in business. Well, this is certainly one of those places where transparency, particularly transparency on the team, is really important. We'll talk about a bunch of the components of a customer journey map in the next section, But the truth is that we already have owners for these artifacts, right? That people own systems, people own processes, people own risks, people own data. And knowing where that's used is really important, and helping them understand the impact that they're having, and particularly the impact that they're going to have when they change these things. Well, customer experience management and customer journey mapping is a framework within which you can contain and relate these things in business relevant ways, which means, once again, with that transparency and visibility, you can use that and your team thinking, as you've mentioned, together to make better decisions and to prevent risk. That's the other thing, when we talk about benefits and risks, there is a risk that changing internal processes to streamline operations ends up with your customers getting angry at you. I'll give you a really, really current example of that. I know there's a big blackout right now on Reddit and subreddits because somebody decided to change their API pricing. That's an internal process that was changed for the purpose of some business purpose. There was a business justification. They changed their internal process. They changed the parameters. And what is it ended up with? It ended up with thousands of subreddits going dark on purpose to fight back against these changes. And had they had a chance to, in advance, understand what the experience of their users were with this, they might have made a different decision. But now they've got this impact out there. They've got a negative press. I mean, listen, I heard about this in the news.
Yeah.
And that's a decision that they'll now have to use their PR department, and they're going to hope to sort of weather the storm, whereas they could have made a much better decision if they'd maybe seen it all together in one customer journey map.
Well, the good news is, to quote Ted Lasso here, we all have the attention span of a goldfish. So I'm pretty sure that Reddit will weather the storm in this example. But in general, I wholeheartedly agree, because when you understand, and if you understand your customer and the steps that they go through, it will have an impact on your architecture. And those are typically things that are expensive. Changing a system is an effort. It costs you licenses and people and all that wonderful stuff, maybe some fines if you have to go out of an existing contract and yada, yada, yada. So I think having an outside-in perspective helps to align those changes. And in addition to this, it also avoids the groupthink in organizations, which I think is the biggest criticism that I have in modern organizations today, where people just say, oh yeah, I just want to appease my leader and have a nice day or go home early or whatever it is, and that's the way how we always have done things here, right? That's typically a recipe for not being innovative.
Mm-hmm. So you want to bring this all together. And I think that you mentioned why this is relevant to our practitioners, but I want to really stress this. A lot of people on these get feedback from our community here. What's your baseline? Are folks involved in architecture and process, and this is a really good feeder for you to know where your innovations, where your engineering will count the most towards a company's actual effect on its customers. We take a look at processes, and I know a bunch of customers of mine have little flags on their process models. This is a customer-facing, this one isn't a customer-facing process. But what is it actually doing to your customer? That's often lost. So when you can work in coordination with your customer experience management practice, you can get more directly connected to your customer's experience, build better processes that are designed to support them, and feel like you can show the value to the organization better as you deliver on the top line of your business's achievements. So
I agree.
I hopefully everyone is gonna loving this so far. We've given you a lot of the justification of this, but hopefully people are on board after hearing all the things you could probably get.
And I also like to chime in, JM, we're going to put some references, and I'm pretty sure they include some case studies and all that wonderful thing in the show notes, right? So Absolutely. It's not just that the two of us just made up some stuff. It's actually done in organization. Oh, we make up a lot of stuff, but that's a different topic, not in this case. But at least it gives you some impression of, hey, what have other people done? How have they changed their way of doing business, and what were the benefits and maybe some pitfalls that they encountered?
That's a great place to learn from. But we're going to take a brief break before we get into the actual how we do it, the second section of our show. But in the meantime, we'd love to leave you with a couple of thoughts, at least your thoughts. What have you done in your organization with regards to customer experience management or customer journey mapping? So what experience do you have with it? Are you still taking that inside out perspective, or are you looking at the outside in to make decisions on process and architecture? And if you've dabbled in the topic, what are your experiences with it? What are your lessons learned? And, as a note, we don't always put this on here, but we'd love if people were to go into the comments on LinkedIn or send us an email at hello@whatsyourbaseline.com, or any of our contact information available through the show you'll hear at the end. We'd love to get your perspective on this, because we're really fascinated to hear stories from the road from our lovely listeners who are practicing this every day. So we'll leave you for a moment to think about that. Maybe log on to your email or log on to LinkedIn and leave us a comment. And we'll come back with our second section, the how.
Too numerous to try and list, though I'm ashamed of every bit, just another thing to fix. What you'd say if I sat you down and told you that I'm sorry and I wanted you to know. So I just want to thank you.
And welcome back. In this second section, as we all know, we're going to talk about the how. So we will talk about, okay, how do we implement customer experience management in organizations, and what do we actually do? Right? When you think about it, if you're leading your design team, not the fancy ones with the turtleneck, but the real people. If you're leading your design team in your architecture practice, well, what should you look for? Right. Yeah. And the first thing I think, JM, is not the actual artifact. We're getting to the artifacts as well. But the first question, I think, is who contributes to customer experience management? Is that something that you make up yourself? You're sitting in your office or home office in your chair, and you're thinking about, which customers could I reach? And what do they do all day long? Hint, hint, they're sitting in their home office and try to procrastinate. But that's a different story. So who contributes to customer experience management?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I've seen it done a few different ways. I've seen teams that are focused specifically on customer experience management. So that's the people who will necessarily be the lead of this conversation. Experience management, experience analysts, under usually someone at a vice president level of experience, who will be running that group. And that will be adjacent to your process improvement group. And that's our first contributor. So process is certainly one of those contributors. People who know how our internal processes work are important, because they can highlight when you're talking about a customer interacting with our company, what process do they affect, or more specifically, what process affects them at a journey step. And so your BAs, business analysts, will be a really important contributing part of the team. Second piece is you'll want EAs, your enterprise architects. So as you're coordinating your customer journey analysis, understanding what systems and channels are being activated. More systems. Channels is where you actually bring in the third participant, which is often marketing, or someone who's marketing knowledgeable. But your enterprise architects are going to give you an understanding of what systems exist, how those systems are being used by customers. And once again, they work with the BAs, and we can have a conversation about whether enterprise architecture includes business process, but that's a longer one, to make sure that they see both the perspective of execution and the perspective of automation, which are often different things, some embedded in process, some embedded in systems. So the next piece of the puzzle is you're bringing in a couple of other auxiliary people who would know things. So a good example of that is you might bring in risk analysts who are going to be there to help to understand where risk impacts customer. So for instance, do we have a risk, an operational risk at this step that could force a process or a system to no longer work properly, which could impact our customer's experience at this moment? How do we use this as a tool for risk mitigation? So often those people will be feeders into your customer experience analysis. And then it can get down to a bunch of other different people who maybe there are folks who are from the BI team that will take things like Net Promoter Score or feedback that come in form of dashboards and interview assessments and feedback forms. That those data analysts and data capture folks can help inform you with real customer perspectives on what's actually happening. And that's the whole team brought together, often through the framework of a customer journey map.
No. You forgot one of the most important groups, which is the guys with the turtleneck, because I'm wearing one today.
Strategy.
Those are guys. Yeah. But then in addition to that, it's also the designers of your applications, the designers of whatever, the customer experience. And I hate quoting it because everybody does it. But when you think about when you buy an Apple product, there is an experience when you do the unboxing, right? And it's not by coincidence. Somebody has thought about this, What is the process to get your new laptop? You bring it back home. What's the first thing when you open the box? Oh, the box is white, Why is it not cardboard colored like all the other boxes that you get, right? And then you open it and you don't get the legalese text as the first thing that you see, right? So there is some experience design that could be in applications or outside of applications, but you need somebody who thinks about this. And this is psychology, right? And people get trained in these areas of psychology to do those tasks. So I would not forget those. There might not be the guys I would lead with, but they're definitely an important part of your team.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Roland. I'm too quick to dismiss that, but you're right. Those are the folks who are trying to design that experience, and that does touch on things like marketing. But customer experience is a bit of a different thing because it touches on the repeatability of this in each customer's individual interactions with the brand and its products and services. Sometimes I might actually tie into things like customer success, who can get feedback from our customers, say this is what's working, this is what isn't working, and bringing those people to the table is important. So it all comes down to this meeting ground, this space that collects all of these individual stakeholders. We usually call that a customer journey map. And those maps are designed to bring people together to have this conversation. And some of the best tools out there will prompt you with fields that will help to ask the hard questions. What's happening? Who does this? Who's responsible? What systems are they using? What channels are they activating? That's a marketing question. Sometimes marketing question. What data are they having? What are the risks? What are the opportunities? These sorts of questions. We'll go through this in a more exhaustive list in a second, but this is prompting the right types of answers because we're asking the right kinds of questions.
And speaking of that, I think there is, or I haven't seen it, so I'm curious what our listeners have seen. I have not seen, unfortunately, a tool that can do everything that we're going to list in a few seconds. But before we get to this what's the process of mapping out customer experience? What are the things that you have to do? You say, hey, JM, hey, Roland, we're convinced now this is the next best thing since sliced bread after process mining, process simulation, and blah, 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 whatever we spoke about in the past. This is the one thing that I want to do. So, JM, what would be the first steps that you would do?
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, once again, credit where credit is due. These are not my own practices. These are practices that have been taken up from a bunch of different places, including a good friend of mine, Jerry McCann, who helped me learn a lot of these best practices. So shout out to him on this podcast here. But let's talk about our practice, our process. So first is what we're going to do in customer experience in customer journey in particular is we're going to set clear objectives. So why are we doing this? What are the expectations for the outcome of this exercise of customer mapping and customer journey management? So what do we want to get to?
No, you can't do this. No, you can't do this, JM, because that's the first thing that everybody forgets, developing a strategy. What do we want to do?
Oh, yeah.
No.
No, let's just make it better. Let's just make it better. Cool. All good. Oh, we want to make better. Oh, things. Yeah, no. We want to be clear. Here are our clear objectives. of this exercise. This is what we expect to get out of this customer journey mapping exercise. And here's what we're going to do about it.
And how we measure success. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh my
Don't
goodness.
forget that.
Yeah. We if we don't have that, we're, oh my. Yeah. So that's the first piece of the puzzle. The next piece that we want to understand is, what are our customers? And this is going to be a big segmentation exercise that will help you to understand the different personas you're going to define and what their goals are, what their needs are, what their demographics are. It's a big analysis and it doesn't have to be every possible customer. You're going to choose your ideal customer profile or profiles that you're going to use for this analysis exercise, because those are the ones you have decided as a company based on your objectives, step one, that you're going to try and target with the improvement of experience.
I agree. And it's called personas, if you're looking for the term for this, right? Mm-hmm. But just keep in mind, you don't have, when you set this up, you don't have to take the gunshot or whatever approach. You just take every best guess, right? You can do what people did in the past. You can do some market research, right? And say, hey, who's actually going to buy our stuff? When I think about digital products, you have tools like Gainsight and WalkMe and all those things that capture the interaction. So that might give you some idea, oh, our customers live in this country. Or you might ask people, strange idea, hey, what do you think about it? Why did you buy our products and all those things, right? So that you get an idea that you actually aim for the 31-year-old stay-at-home mom who wants to buy the new, whatever, process modeling tool, right? That you want to offer, right? So that she can track her baby's progress, whatever. I make that stuff up, obviously. But the idea is, it's not a thing that you in your architecture group do by yourself. Involve others, right?
Yes.
So marketing will have a lot of data. A lot of stuff can come out of your system to help you shape that down. But the outcome, in my opinion, and I know, JM, you will agree, is you should come up with certain personas, and it could be more than one, for each of the products that you have.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I would agree that it does. I'll also in this step, you want to knowing your customer is a thing. There's like a legal framework for that, for banking and finance. But in this case, what we're talking about is there's a lot of information you can gather about customers. In fact, I would say there's too much information you could gather about it. So you want to also segment this down into what information is relevant about that customer as it pertains to experience mapping. So determine the fields you're going to care about, what sort of scores you're going to want to measure, and how you're going to use that in your mapping exercise to determine where to focus.
Yeah. And then also have a look at your competition, right?
Yeah.
So if you're in the mommy blogger process management space, right, with my little example, well, guess what? Is there competition in there, right? Or to say with Mark's example from last episode, maybe the better solution is not to rent a car. The better solution is to provide scooters and public transportation tickets.
Absolutely. And the next thing here we want to do is decide on the platform we're going to use to capture this thing. And the idea is you want to decide on the journey tool you're going to use. So there's a bunch of different technology solutions out there for customer journey mapping, hopefully one that's aligned with your business processes, because I think that's are sort of two sides of the same coin. One is what the customer sees, one is what you do, but standardize on how you're going to capture this information, and standardize what it's going to look like. Remember, you're aligning it for across teams. You're bringing all these stakeholders at the table together. They need to see the same thing and understand what that thing is kind of at a glance. That's important.
Yeah, I think it's what I've seen in the past is, so there's obviously tools out there that are customer journey specific, right? So people identified this as a topic. They want to do this. And then the turtlenet fraction will go and flip immediately to wireframing tools like a Balsamiq or something similar to say, oh yeah, now we understand, and now we come up with the nice screens and make it a pleasant experience for you, Mr. User. And then there's the other faction that says, oh no, customer experience is part of process management and analysis. I need to have all the information in one repository, and it needs to be aligned to my strategies, to my apps, to my capabilities, and whatnot. I think it's a mix of both. And that's why I said a couple of minutes ago, I haven't seen a tool that can do everything, but I wish there was one. One that helps you to capture things in one database so that it's reusable and all those other benefits that a database has. That allows you to do those relationships, to rationalize why do we do those things. But then on the other hand, also brings in the information that you need to do a proper solution blueprinting, which is a topic that we spoke about in the past. And then part of that solution blueprinting is obviously then having a design tool that allows you to mock up the fancy screens, right?
Yep.
And then you can discuss, okay, should it be a black and white wireframe with a comic font, or should it be a high fidelity wireframe that you have? But at the end of the day, we're talking about a plan, right? And plans are different levels of granularity. They are not the real thing. And I think this is where I think the lower border is. You try to understand what you need, what you have, who your customers are. You map it to all the different things that are relevant for your architecture. And then you come up with a future state. You simulate it in between. You come up with your future state, and then you create the blueprint for an implementer to do this. The package designer, the IT person, the developer, and all those guys that are there. And most likely the implementation will be across things, and sometimes it's super effing annoying. I do have, and this is a negative shout out, I do have an HP printer, and it annoys the heck out of me that it always wants me to download the HP app so that they can put me more apps on for discounted ink cartridges and whatnot. If I just want to have a damn scan of a document in a better quality than my phone can do, right? Yeah. Hint, hint, hint. Apple still has it under the printer menu for those of you who are looking for it. So that is an example where I think the customer experience thing went south, because I'm super annoyed by it, right? Will I throw out my printer? No, because those 5 sheets of paper that I print every year, I can't stand it, but it's not pleasant. So again, alignment, or identify what you want, align it with all the stuff in your architecture, and then come up with your blueprint, and then you hand it over to the people who actually make things happen.
Right. And along the way, you're trying to give them as much information as you possibly can. So another couple of things we do as we map is we tend to try and understand the linchpin between customer journey step and process step through what I like to use the word customer touch point. And customer touch point is, think of it as a capability you create with your internal processes that your customers access as they do their external process. So for instance, if I wanted to, as you were saying, there's, I'm a stay-at-home mom who's buying process management software. Well, I need to be able to check out comparative plans and pricing on those plans. My customer experience, that's a step in my experience where I'm doing comparative plan pricing. There needs to be a capability on the website that has the ability to compare different plans. So that touch point, which is plan comparison, that is a touch point between our internal process and my process, which is choose which plan I'm going to pick.
That is one. Yes. And I agree. That's important, right? You should have that alignment. But on the other side, there's also steps that the customer does. And I don't know if I can carry the analogy that a customer does that does not affect us, but we should take into consideration. So, for example, if our stay-at-home mom and she needs to, and this is so stereotypical, I hate it. She needs to change the diapers of her little kid, while she's doing that exercise that you just described. You don't want to lose the session, right? There needs to be an easy mechanism for her to come back after she's done the dirty deeds and continue her exercise.
Yeah, or put a text to speech or something like that so that she can hear the thing on the page as she's doing something else. Yeah, there's ways we can do that to make it easy. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's something that you need to keep in mind when designing your blueprint, because that is not a touch point in the sense that you described it as, oh yeah, this is where the step of the customer aligns with the step of the organization, but it's something that the customer does by herself, thankfully, and has an impact on how we design things.
Yeah, and that leads into a couple other things we want to take into consideration as we're doing this, which is understanding outcomes, right? So we want to measure anything we can and pick points we're going to be measuring. Could be from things like customer surveys, so the Net Promoter Score and feedback. It could be things like from process mining. Haha, look at that. We can incorporate that to see what the linger time is on different pages, or the percentage that people went down a path we wanted to in this offer. Like, how many people clicked on the banner at the top of the website that we put that says, click here for a special offer, 20% off if you buy a new account, right? So we want to measure the outcomes, and we can only really change what we measure because we understand whether or not it's working. We also want to track our weak points. And so this is part of the customer experience management and the practice here is to understand where we're not doing a good job. So getting feedback, putting in our risks, putting in our opportunities for improvement, our roadblocks in our customer journey. Those are important things. We'll take a look at that a little bit and when we talk about the actual making the map itself. But that's an important thing we need to be doing. And this whole process should be time-scaled. Remember that we're not looking at doing this customer experience management as a one and done. If that's the case, well, congratulations. You're only going to ever have the customers you have today. No more. Yeah. Not one and done. This is a continuous process because you are continuously operating your business. So repeat the reviews with your customers. Repeat the design exercises in your customer experience mapping and customer journey mapping process, and evolve your customer experience because your customers are evolving as your business is evolving.
So that brings us, a little fanfare. That brings us to the first thing that I think you should create when, as an artifact, when you start with the whole customer experience management topic. When you think about the artifact, the first thing that you should do is you should understand what are the different journeys that you have. You should have an overview. You should have a landscape of this, So understand what is the macro journey, if you will, right? The connection between individual journeys. So to give you an example, and I'm old enough to remember that, back in the day when you wanted to have a new shirt, right? You drove to the next best city. You went into a department store. You looked for a shirt. You see if it fits, and then you go to the cashier and put money on the table, and then you went home and be a happy camper, right? That has changed, right? So now we have different channels. You can buy your shirt online, which has a different set of processes behind it because you just don't leave it in the department store. If it doesn't fit, you have to send it back and you have to get reimbursed and blah, right? You have different payment options. It's not only cash. It's things like credit cards. It's things like Google, Apple, Garmin, whatever, pay on your watch and all those things. So the complexity can become very high very easily, especially when you think about some offerings of personalized items. Get whatever printed you want on your sneakers, because you prefer purple sneakers with yellow text. Be my guest, are they refundable or not? So there's different journeys that in the past was super simple. Go to the department store, look for a shirt that you liked and only the ones that they have, and go home. And now you have basically that thing called internet with unlimited options, and you need to understand what are the passes through. What do you want to do and what do you don't want to do? Right. So to stick with my example, do you want to have payments through the watch? And if so, which services? Right. Is it Apple, Google, Garmin, or whatever is out there?
I think that that this is important to recognize that the complexity is a big factor here. This is about getting your hands around that complexity, and that is an important part of the puzzle that also factors into doing this and providing this to a larger group of stakeholders. It's one of those things about making these documents, making this everything really widely available so that you can get a handle on the different channels, the different paths people use, and doing this with a larger group of people. You have this principle of all do some versus some do all. If a small number of people are doing all the work, it's going to be a huge amount to manage. But if you get a lot of those stakeholders we talked about before to each contribute their own little part of it, you can actually get it done and make it effective and see meaningful change. And that visibility, making that document widely available, making a living document widely available, really gets you there.
And if I can take a comparison or an analogy to the stuff that we typically work with day in, day out, those customer journey objects to me are like capabilities for the internal activities that you do, because that is the what. You describe the what, right? And you make a conscious decision what's in and what's not. And I think this is important.
Absolutely. Well, I think we've been talking a lot about the process and the why, and I think our third and final section of the show, we're going to get into the how, as we actually came about, and an example of a customer journey map. So we're going to take a brief break right now as we switch into the last piece of our puzzle and actually go through step by step what a customer journey map looks like to create. But in the meantime, think about your process. How have you approached customer journey? Have you set objectives? Have you understood your customers? Did you align between yourself and your process? Do you understand your impact? What has your organization succeeded at in terms of customer experience and excellence in customer experience? And what are you struggling with today? What negative feedback do you continue to get? And how might you approach resolving that with customer journey mapping?
Baby, you ain't no shooting star. You ain't as good as you think you are. There's no shame in giving up. You'll be happier in the long run, 'cause you ain't no shooting star.
And welcome back to the third part of our show today. And here I'd like to continue with the model types, the artifacts that you create. You know, we spoke about the overview, the customer journey landscape, if you will, and those individual journey objects that you obviously will have then to describe. And the first thing I think that you would do is you would create, at least in my mind, a persona map. JM, would you agree?
Yeah. Tell me about persona maps, Roland.
This is typically something that people do in PowerPoint or Figma or whatever, right? So they look at and say, oh yeah, how do we describe the 31-year-old stay-at-home mom, you know, who's looking for process tools? And they come up with some characteristics, you know, oh yeah, she lives in a suburb and she has had bad experience with process tools before, you know, and what are her feelings around this and all these things, you know, that is one way of describing it, right? And the idea is obviously to get a rich picture of who your customer is. You know, what are the circumstances why the customer would choose your services or your products? Another way, and I will put a link in the show notes for that as well, is an approach that is called value proposition design, which is a little bit more techy, rationalized approach, where you say, yeah, I have a customer, but that customer actually has to do a job. You know, so you try to describe the job that the person will have to do. You know,
Right.
as a process analyst, I need to create diagrams. I need to run analysis reports and blah. You know, so what our fictitious stay-at-home mom would have to do. And then you look at two aspects. One is the pains that you have while doing the job. You know, oh, I can't find stuff, you know, or I'm not able to describe this little aspect because my admin has restricted me in doing so, or my tool doesn't allow this. And then you look for gains, you know, delighters, you know, to say, oh, what would make me happy when I do this process mapping exercise? You know, oh, I have a little wizard that helps me to create my job faster, you know, automatic semantic checks. I get, when I add a gateway in my BPMN diagram, I get a little triangle that says you must have 2 outgoing connections. These type of things that you might want to see, that admittedly not very delightful, but that makes your life easier. And then obviously when you define your product, and that's the other side of the value proposition design, is you obviously look for pain relievers and delighters, gain creators. And then the last step is you try to package your product accordingly so that you provide a tool that helps doing the job, but includes pain relievers and delighters in it.
Yeah, you might think of this. I've actually seen this referred to in some capacity as an empathy map. I mean, you want to think about the experience of another person, and having empathy for another person is really the cornerstone of being able to reach them. And that's something you want to do in your organization, is really reach people, the human beings. So what is an empathy map? It could look like a lot of different things, but generally in the middle of an empathy map is a customer. And we want to understand the things about that customer. So what are they saying? So what statements are they making? What are they doing? So what actions can we see them taking? What are they thinking? As in, what is their internal monologue that is causing them to behave in a certain way? And what are they feeling? So what are the pains or the pleasures that they have in the interaction with their processes, their activities, their journey? So that empathy is really going to give you a sense of knowing this customer. Now, this comes from a bunch of different places. It could come from user interviews. It could come from just, market research and industry understanding and expertise. But the closer you can get to your customer, the better it is. The more you can target what you're doing towards the actual human beings you're trying to support and influence. And talking about support and influence, Roland, another thing is your internal customers or your internal folks who are supporting this process. And I know you do a lot of this. Tell me about stakeholder mapping.
Oh yeah, that's another thing. And I just wanted to chime in. Thanks for prompting me. Because at the end of the day, you as the designer of a solution, you obviously need not only to come up with that most awesome idea how your product looks like, but you also have to quote unquote sell it internally. So one of the things, and we spoke about that in a previous episode when we were looking at org change management, is to map out your stakeholders. Who are the people with influence? What is the chain of decision making? What are, and I mentioned it back then to say, don't make them too public. What are maybe shortcuts? Jim Bob is friends with Marianne. Can he influence her if she holds the purse and all that type of stuff? So it's understanding the different stakeholders, not only in your organization, but also with partners that you might have, manufacturers, if you produce whatever product, right? And bring them on board, because there's always, and I said that in a previous podcast as well, there's always two scales that are run in parallel. One is the best idea that you have, from having no idea with a value of 0 to having a super bad idea, which has a value of 1, and the super excellent world-changing idea, which has a value of 5. And then you have the ability to execute. If you can't execute, it's 5 times 0, so it's 0, right? If you execute purely, it's 5 times 1. Well, it's better than 0. And if you execute your best idea ever in the best possible way, well, it's 5 by 5, 5 times 5, so 25, right? So you have to have an understanding what your level of execution will be. And the key factor in that is your stakeholders, because they hold the purse and they might be able to say yay or nay or come up with changes. And to refer what Caspar said in, I think, episode 16, very, very long time ago, look at those things, how to impact or to measure and identify the impact of change. The change in your product, the change in your applications, the costs that come with it, and all that type of stuff, because that's stuff that your stakeholders who have an inside-out perspective will care about.
Yeah, I agree. And you want to equip them with that value proposition you said before, to give them an understanding of why they're doing it and what they could potentially receive from it, rather than just simply lip service. Oh, of course we should do this. Well, no, not of course necessarily. You need to prove that. And that's something that you can do when you have a really good customer journey map.
Maybe this is also the time to bring in your marketing people, to bring in your finance people, right? To say, okay, those are stakeholders that have the power of the purse, right? You need to bring those guys in. It's not just the big boss, the VP that you have to sell it, or the SVP of engineering, right? It's all those other guys that you have to bring into the picture to produce a product that a customer will be willing to fork over money for.
I agree. So we've been teasing it this whole time. Let's talk about customer journey maps and actually lay them down. So there are a few different components of customer journey maps that I think are important. You may agree or disagree. Your mileage may vary, but this is what I use and what I like. And we're going to go through my top 10 things that you put on a customer journey map and why I think they're important. Number one is you put your customer journey steps. By the way, you can have customer journey phases. It's another way of categorizing things, but most importantly, you're putting the steps they go through. It's their process. And does it have a lot of variation? Generally, no. What we do is we try and, as much as possible, put a streamlined scenario or a set of journey steps to understand what a customer is doing in the order in which it executes.
Yeah, and maybe to put a mental picture into the mind, customer journey maps typically are a tabular format.
Yeah,
so
well,
you have
it's like a row
kind of, yeah, rows. Yes. So you have different aspects of your customer journey. The first one is obviously, what are the journey steps? What does the customer do? Right. And again, and I said it earlier, don't start with when your process begins. Start with a problem that a customer might have, because your current product might not do the trick. Right. So just think about that. The next thing that you want to have a look at, and it depends on how you skim the cat. You could look at your processes first, or you could look at those touch points that JM mentioned earlier as the next best step. So where does the journey intersect with what we do, right? So to stick with that example that we had before with the rental car company, yeah, we do have a process that rents out cars to customers, either online or at a station, right? But that is a first identification. I wouldn't go too deep at this point in time, but I would say, oh yeah, there is an intersection between the customer journey step and what we do. And in this case, it's the moment when someone rents a car.
I agree. The next thing you want to do is bring in some information from that empathy map we talked about before, and that is your emotion or your sentiment. One of the big reports you get out of customer journey mapping a lot of the time is a sentiment curve. That sentiment curve talks about the emotion of your customer throughout their journey. So it will go high when they're happy and positive. It might dip low when they're struggling and have pain points. And all along you are identifying those pain points, identifying potential best practices and moments of truth in your journey to help you understand where you should act. And certainly emotion and sentiment is a big feeder for that.
Wait, you don't like to stand in line at a rental car station? Come on, JM. You meet so many nice people while you're there. But you're absolutely right. And I think that the key words are moment of truth, right? How do I feel in that situation when I'm standing in line after a red-eye flight? I'm tired. I just want to go to the hotel and get a handful of sleep, and now I see a line that's longer than whatever your favorite ice cream shop on the hottest day in summer, so you're obviously not amused about this.
Exactly. And you want to know that, be able to bring that out, identify where that is. And that's where you can act, or you should act, in order to make sure that those are carefully considered and procedurally implemented in systems and processes. The next is you want to do the most dangerous thing of all. What's the most dangerous thing, Roland? It is ownership.
The people, of course.
Oh my goodness. And owning a step in a journey is quite an arduous task. You need to be the one who's accountable to the success of a customer executing against a step. Oh, risk is everywhere, but it's also such reward. Really important. So ownerships in a given step matter a lot. That gives you an internal responsibility to ensure the success of a customer at that point in time.
And this is where your stakeholder map comes in, right? Because you've identified who are the people who need to be brought up to par. But you also mentioned something else. Because we're executing an internal step, right? There's obviously the opportunity that there's risk involved with that. So this is where you bring in your risk manager to help you identify, well, what could go south. When you rent the car, just handing over the keys without a signature, right? Or without having swiped the credit card, that's obviously a risk for the rental car company that you want to avoid. And those need to be identified at the appropriate step, the internal process step that you go through.
Yeah, and you talk about internal process steps. You can also talk specifically about the affected processes or process steps internally that are directly connected to this customer step, this journey step. So what is a direct linkage between our internal process? And that's beyond just the touch points, which might refer to a specific moment in time. But overall, if we're looking at providing a service to people, this is our service provisioning process that affects this particular step in our customer's journey to give us a macro view of what we should be looking to improve. That also talks to systems and channels as well, because that's a big part of how we deliver services, right? We choose channels through which we will be delivering that service, and we choose systems that we're going to make available to customers to get that service.
And I think it's interesting to note that the customer touchpoint, at least in my mind, is, to stick with my example, it's identifying the high level process to say, yep, there's a rental car, there's how to rent a car process, right? What you're talking about when we talk about systems and risks and all that stuff, we're talking the next level.
Yes.
What are the steps that a customer and the representative have to go through to actually get the car rented out, including whatever, swiping the credit card, including printing out the contract agreement, including giving directions to the garage where the car is parked and all that type of stuff. So now we're in deep process nerd territory. Yeah, we're not at the high level. How do we feel about this? There, obviously, the aim is to say, okay, each of those steps should be rationalized to make the overall experience as pleasant as we can make it pleasant.
Yeah, I would agree. And we want to also bring in a proof that we actually did this. That's when we start about talking about data and KPIs. What are the KPIs we are measuring? What are the values we would like them to achieve? And where are we right now? So let's take customer feedback data, things like Net Promoter Score, the feedback we might get from them. Let's take system data and understand whether or not there's lots of like roadblocks or bottlenecks or lingers on parts of our journey. And let's see where the data is telling us we should look.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about the process, we're looking actually at the measures. What are the measures that we capture? I think the next step is you need to aggregate them to KPIs, which is a complete different exercise, right? But those will be then aligned to your strategies, initiatives, and all that other stuff that you have, right? So now we have an additional level of abstraction in here to say, okay, how do we create the alignment between our customer journey map and the strategy thinking that happens in your organization?
Which passes back to your stakeholder map, which you talked about before, because now we're closing the loop on that, right? Because some of your stakeholders are very invested in that strategy map, and that's what you want to do.
But it's also aligned to your value proposition design, right? Why do I create this whole thing in the first place? You're absolutely right.
We're closing the whole loop. Oh no!
Well, there's one roadblock in between. Pun intended, right? Which is also you do this customer journey mapping just like you would do processes, right? You would capture the current state, and then you would come up with future states of this. How can we improve? And the first thing that you come up is just like in a process where what are opportunity improvements? What are pain points that you go through? What are roadblocks where things really die, and nothing goes forward? And you need to identify those because in your as is, because otherwise, how do you create to be, right, a future state that can avoid those things, right? And while you're doing that, just like in processes, you go and have all people involved, your risk people and all those other guys to say, is that a good idea? Does it make sense? And then, well, we can talk about measurement in a sec.
Wait, I just heard you say something about 2B. And you are absolutely right, because your customer journey map is a feeder for your 2B customer journey map. That's right. You're going to try and design a better experience. So if today you have a roadblock, or you've identified opportunities on a given step, improvement opportunities, what would the ideal customer journey of tomorrow look like? How do we enable that with systems, processes, people, channels, capabilities in the organization? And we're going to design our 2B as a template for transformation and attaching KPIs, attaching KPI value, target values, tying that to strategy gives you justification for projects, which would meaningfully improve your customer's experience.
That absolutely makes sense. Yes. But then the question is, and I think we all agree on, now we've described, to be a little summary, now we've described what does our big landscape look like, the customer journey landscape. We've described our personas. We've described their jobs, the value proposition. We've described the internal stakeholders, the empathy maps. What does people say, think, do, and where's the pain, And then we finally came to the more role-based customer journey map that some tools have some fancy reports on that are presentable and whatnot for analysis, so that you can create a better future state of your customer journey, right? And quote unquote, sell it to your stakeholders and determine the impact on processes, applications, risks, and all that architecture gobbledygook that you, our dear listeners, are affected with every day. But JM, hey, there's another question that I have, because it's all great, and you alluded a little bit to it. It's all great that you can design all that stuff. I'm pretty sure you can also implement it, because we now know that the turtleneck people have to design nice screens and nice packaging and all that type of stuff. But how do we measure the benefits? How do we analyze all that stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is where you start to hybridize the design work and the measurement of real outcomes to customer. This is where we start to take a look at a combination of things like process or customer mining, which is an emerging term that I really like, which measures what the customers are actually doing in your systems, as well as you can look at net retention rates. So how much are customers staying versus how much are customers leaving versus how many customers are coming on new, and more direct feedback mechanisms such as surveys and customer feedback forms that lead to things like our net promoter score, so the NPS you might have heard. And those things combined, sure, they're not a direct, literally a thermometer on exactly how warm it is, but they're a general feeling of whether or not things are improving or getting worse with how you're delivering services to customers. So it's a great way of telling, are my journeys effective, or are my journeys still fraught with roadblocks, pain points, and opportunities for improvement?
But the one thing that I take away here is that customer journey mining, to stick with the topic of our last episode, enterprise mining, customer journey mining is not equal process mining. Let that sit for a moment. It's something different, right? It needs different inputs, because it not only looks at your internal process steps, what process mining does, because that's recorded in your systems, in your log files. You need to bring in all that other information. And I mentioned the tools like Gainsight and WalkMe and all those guys, where you have the actual evidence that a customer was looking on your website and wanted to start the process and then stopped it at any point in time, right? And I think there's more sources that you might want to bring in. And to stick with that analogy, if customer journey mapping is reading of records from whatever systems you have, right? You need the equivalent of task management, observing what a customer actually does. And I'm not promoting cameras in every customer's home and you look at this. No. But I think things like surveys, right, might be a good first step into that equivalent of task mining for customer journey mapping and customer journey mining.
I agree. Well, hopefully you got a bit of a sense of things. We're going to take one last short break as you think through what you've heard today. And in particular, we'd like you to think about how this matches up with your mental model of a customer journey. You've heard us go through the different parts of the customer journey map. Is this what you think of? Are you using other types of symbols or other types of information you're capturing? And where are you getting that information from? Is it giving you a meaningful picture of your customer experiences? And is it giving you a meaningful measurement of how effective that customer journey is? We'll leave you for a moment and come back with our last section and a farewell to the show and this season.
What's it like to be a grown-up? No one tells you what to do. Wouldn't that be nice? No one tells you what to do. Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice?
And welcome back to the last part of our show today, which is also Sniff, the last part of season 4 of our podcast.
Oh.
Sniff, but no worries, we're coming back. So that's the promise. But I hope we were able to convince you that customer experience management is something that you might want to pursue and that it helps you in creating better outcomes for your customers. And to do a little recap, and I don't want to go too much into detail, we spoke about what is customer experience management, how is it different from customer journey mapping, which we all know is just a part of it. Why do you do this? Why is it the benefit of bringing in the outside in perspective versus the inside out? We spoke about benefits and risks of customer experience management. And then we looked at how does it connect to the architectural work that you're currently doing. We spoke about who's contributing to this. Who do you have to bring in? We spoke about the process, how to map customer experience, so how to create the artifacts. And then obviously we went through the different model types, the different artifacts that you would create, starting with the overviews, persona maps, stakeholder maps, value proposition design, empathy maps, and lastly, customer journey maps, and how all that stuff is connected to other views in your architecture. And lastly, we spoke very, very briefly about how to measure all that stuff, and that we're not the product managers of customer journey mining tools, but we have some ideas how to do this and what type of information should come in. Jam, did I summarize this in 30 seconds or a minute well enough for this show?
You did. Absolutely. And thank you, Roland. I mean, we thank our guests, which is funny. But I want to say thank you to you. It's always fantastic to be able to host these things with you and go through topics that I care about deeply. For those of you who want to reach out to us on LinkedIn, you can find both Roland and I on LinkedIn. Please shoot us a message or leave a comment on our posts. We love interacting with folks who've been listening to the podcast or just general people who'd like to talk about topics across enterprise architecture, business process, and everything in between, which I think is one of the things we do today.
And a little secret, you obviously can send us emails as well. It's roland@whatsyourbaseline.com and it's jm@whatsyourbaseline.com. So something that you might keep in mind. We're happy to read all your comments.
Exactly. And Roland's been talking about whatsyourbaseline.com for a while, but it is. Whatsyourbaseline.com is a great place to go for all the information we've left for the past 49 episodes. My goodness. This is whatsyourbaseline.com/episode 49 for this one specifically. But we are so thankful for everyone in our audience for coming along with us on this journey, listening to all of our episodes. And we're so excited to come back with our season 5 opener, our big episode 50. Whoa, it's going to be exciting. But until we return with more that we love and hopefully you love too, I've been J.M. Arlinson.
And I'm Roland Volt.
And we will see you next season.